Hey, on this episode of Gen X Amplified, I am chatting with Kim Alexis Newton, who is a former Hallmark Cards Incorporated executive, but is now creating massive and meaningful impact on the world as an advisor, board member, author, and quilt artist. Yeah, that's right. And we are going to chat about her story, her powerful pivot at mid-career, and so much more. So, are you ready? Let's do it.
And if I learned anything at Hallmark, it was the importance of reinvention. And I would say that I think it's really important to think about what you want to be in the future instead of just thinking about protecting what you've been.
Welcome to Gen X Amplified, where we bring you inspirational and entertaining conversations with successful Gen X leaders and entrepreneurs.
This is the show created just for you. The powerful generation between the boomers and millennials to help you amplify your story,
Maximize your impact,
and become Gen Exceptional in business and in life.
Now, here's your host, Adrian Porter.
I am so excited today about this inspirational and comforting conversation. So I'm going to jump right in. So without further ado, please welcome someone who spent many years greeting all of us around the world with words of encouragement and love on very special days, but is now not only helping women feel cozy and comfortable with quilted love, but also inspiring them to pause and find their purpose. My fellow Vanderbilt peep, Kim Alexis Newton. Kim, what is going on with you?
Hey, Adrian, it's so great to be here. Thank you for that introduction.
No, not my pleasure. So I was joking in the intro. I was so excited for multiple reasons, definitely because of all the work that I have been witnessing and watching and observing you doing. But we have a very special relationship because we both went to the same B school, but we're not at the same time at Vanderbilt.
That's right.
And I have to share this story. So when I was deciding to go to B school, this was back in like 96, early 97, when I went in 97, fall of 97, I was researching colleges and the top 25 business schools. And then I reached out to Vanderbilt and got their little pamphlet in the mail of their program. And within the pamphlet, I'm looking for faces that look like me, obviously, because I want to see that they're representing. And I see this young lady in this blue jacket, I believe. And she was the head of the Owen Black Student Association. And she went to Fisk. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And I was inspired. And it happened to be Kim Graham at the time.
Yes. I remember that picture. That's hilarious.
I wanted to definitely shout that out because you probably totally forgot about that. But I wanted to let you know that part of the motivation, among other things, but me seeing your face and the things that you were doing and the leadership that you had at Owen really inspired me. So I wanted to thank you. And now 20 some years later,
You're right. Oh my gosh.
We're having a chat about all the powerful work that you are doing. I want you to take a moment, if you don't mind, because you have such an inspirational story, Kim, especially for a lot of listeners who are professionals and even are entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. And I wanted you to talk about your professional and personal journey a little bit, because I think a lot of those chapters in your story are so inspirational. And then we're going to talk and unpack all the great work that you're doing. So if you can just talk about your journey, if you don't mind. And then
sure, absolutely. So, I was in corporate America for 24 years and just recently left. And I'm originally from California, the Bay Area. And as you mentioned, went through Nashville for undergrad at Fisk and then Vanderbilt for business school. I majored in accounting and I interned in accounting. And I always encourage people, to go and test and see because I interned in accounting and figured out that I did not want to work one day in accounting. That was, which is one of the reasons why I went straight through and got my MBA in marketing at Vanderbilt. And we'll talk about this, I'm sure, many times, but I have a huge creative side to me. My aunt was an established African-American artist. Her artwork was on The Cosby Show. I watched her take her art from, I went with her to the mall to do portraits, all the way to seeing her globally recognized. And her studio was even in our home. And so I have a huge creative side to me. And I always wanted to integrate art and business. And so when I graduated, I decided I had lots of options, luckily. But I wanted to integrate art and business. So I came to Hallmark, which at the time had one of the largest creative organizations. And I knew I could work with creative people, even though I was on the business side. And I had a fantastic career there. I mean, I expected to be at Hallmark for 2 years, Adrian. And I did bring a lot of Vanderbilt alums with me along the way. I think 8 to 10 people ended up following me. But you know how things happen. I met my husband, and 23 years later, I'm still in Kansas City. So,
wait, so
crazy how this happened.
That's great. So before we move on, because we have so much to unpack, I definitely want to just unpack a little bit of that story. Because first, let me go back to. Now I also remember why I really gravitated towards your story even before I got there, because like you, myself, my undergrad degree is in accounting. I went to the University of Memphis, with my hometown in Memphis, so that was still Tennessee.
Both of my parents are from there. Yeah.
Get out of here. All right. And also, I knew that I did not want to do accounting, so I went straight through and I went to Vanderbilt and majored in marketing as well. So I remember too, that was a kind of a kindred spirit and path there as well. And then secondly, you mentioned Hallmark, which obviously is a very powerful legacy brand. And you mentioned your love for integrating art and business, and especially considering your family. So you referenced your aunt. What's your aunt's name? Because that was
Brenda Joy Smith. Brenda Joy
Smith. Because you said
pastel artist.
Wow, I have to definitely look that up. And so you were at Hallmark, and so you said you met your husband was it at Hallmark? You met your husband?
I met him in Kansas City.
Oh, in Kansas City, got it. And
That's
so,
right. And I just have to do a little plug here, Adrian, just to tell you, because I think you and I are both testaments to this, because we'll talk about not necessarily listening to other people and following your own heart. And so when I got to Vanderbilt, they told me not to go straight through, that, it's really hard for people to get jobs.
Right.
And I was the first one to have an offer in my class. And it was a huge lesson for me, because I was like, people will put limits on you if you let them. And that has stuck with me so much through my Fisk Vanderbilt experience. And it's just something I carry with me. And you just brought me right back to that. You and I both went straight through, and we made it. It's okay. It's okay.
Thank you for really, doubling down on that and sharing that. And I want to ask you, you mentioned you brought multiple graduates to Hallmark. Did Hallmark recruit at Vanderbilt prior to you getting a job there?
They didn't.
Were you the first one from
Vanderbilt? I was.
Oh my God.
I called them, and back then you couldn't email. I sent my resume multiple times, and I kept on getting these letters, and I was like, well, clearly they don't understand who I am. So I actually ended up calling the head of HR on a Sunday that I knew he wouldn't answer the phone, and left him a voicemail with all these reasons. And I got a call back on Monday. And at the time I said, well, if the letter you guys are sending me is right, then you have my resume on file. And she got up and got my resume, and by, a couple months later, I had an offer. So
wow,
it was pretty cool.
That is a great story, and so inspirational. Hallmark, 23 years. So obviously that tenure came to an end. Just quickly, before we talk about your transition to what you're doing now, and you mentioned you were there for a while, you had intentionally wanted to be there only 2 years. Yeah. What would you say is just kind of a key lesson from working with such a powerful heritage brand, and maybe some of the nuggets you can talk about even now or later that you still apply when it comes to building your own brand?
Well, so many people, they're especially now, they're like, wow, how can you stay at a company 23 years? I had a fantastic career at Hallmark.
Okay.
And one of the things that really attracted me to the brand was one, mahogany. I wanted to do multicultural marketing. It was my first job, which I loved. And I ended up managing mahogany 3 or 4 times while I was there at different levels. But, I always break my career there down in 3 chapters. First 10 years was all things marketing. And what attracted me was they had so many different kinds of marketing. So I did retail marketing. I did brand marketing. I did product marketing. So I was able to get a lot of marketing experience with one brand. And, with Knight, it's top 2% of brands, even to this day. Huge learnings. They have 6 billion brand interactions a year, even now.
Wow.
And so being able to be a part of it from those different lenses from a marketing perspective was key. And then I called chapter 2 my cross-functional, kind of chapter where I went beyond marketing. I was on my first business transformation team. I was one of 5 leaders tasked with changing 80% of the processes of the company. And I raised up above and I learned how the thing should work end to end. And how I should say, I learned how it was working, and then I learned how it should work. And so I mentor lots of people, and I always tell them, even if you're in and you enjoy your functional expertise, you've got to understand how the whole thing works together. Because I thought I was a good marketer, but once I learned the business end to end, I realized I could be such a better marketer, right? Because I could empathize and understand what my peers were going through, the conversations to have, the levers to pull. And that was really important. And my third chapter, which was by far was my favorite chapter, was my executive leader chapter, where I was plucked out of running about $1 billion business. So I had a $1 billion product P&L running everyday cards, and asked to run strategy for one of the largest business units. Wow. And I also became like a chief of staff for the president of that business unit. And so I was with all the leadership team meetings. I ran them. I saw how decisions were made or weren't made. I saw it all. And then I went to corporate strategy, and I got a broader lens of the entire company, which included the global business. Hallmark's in about 100 plus countries, owned Crayola, the Crown Media, which is all the media channels. So it was, I stayed for 23 years, but I learned and I saw the company from so many different lenses, and such a rich brand to learn that. And my last job there, which, actually talks a lot about what we're going to talk about today, was consumer experience. And so for anything that was Hallmark branded, so they had multiple businesses that were branded Hallmark, but they were all kind of reading from different hymnals, so to speak, different consumers and different, online experiences, different, that kind of stuff. So I was charged with what is going to be the hymnal for the Hallmark brand, and kind of reinventing what the brand would stand for longer term. And so, I think how that comes to our discussion is that a brand experience is the sum of all of the different interactions. And if you're, not intentional about your brand interactions and how you're crafting those, and that's been something I've had to take with me as I have my personal brand now, then, be damned what you put on a PowerPoint, right? It doesn't matter. If you aren't making sure that every time, someone's interacting with you, you're on brand and you're creating the ease that you want them to have, or whatever it is, then it doesn't matter what you want it to be, right? It is what it is.
Wow. I'm so glad you said that. You're right. It's a sum of all experiences. And your experience at Hallmark, there were so many great nuggets, especially for people that are stewards of brands, also for people that aren't necessarily working in a marketing and brand function, but they're just trying to navigate their own reputation of their career story, their business they're building. And I love how you broke down that story, your Hallmark story in those 3 chapters. You said number 1 was all things marketing, number 2, cross-functional, just beyond the marketing function. And then last but not least, which sounds like, you said it was your most fruitful and best experience as an executive, running $1 billion P&L and then consumer experiences. I want to ask you too, did you have, and I'm sure the answer would probably be yes, but you can unpack it more. Obviously, you had mentors along your journey there.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of what we talk about within the Powerful Brand Framework, which part of that pillar is nurture, which is all about cultivating relationships. When people want to build a strong brand, even if you're a consumer brand, the relationships with your consumers, your customers, your clients. As a personal brand, the relationships with the people that you can influence. Do you have a personal board of advisors? Those type of relationships. And so describe the relationships that you nurtured during your journey and the type of mentors that you had.
Yeah. So, I talk about networking a lot, especially with the folks that love it and hate it.
Okay.
So that, it's a necessary evil, but I think there's multiple kinds of networks. And I always remind people there's your operational network. That's the network of people that help you, get your work done. And then there's your personal network, they support you personally. And then there's these sponsorship network, right? The people who can open doors for you.
Wow.
And making sure that you are developing all of those relationships is really important. I think for me, leaving, middle management and going to senior management, brands are made of people. Companies are made of people. Decisions get made through people. And your influence as a leader really has to do with how do you connect with people. And so I learned that throughout, making big decisions at the company. So cultivating relationships within the company. Your peers often get you promoted, not necessarily just managing up. I see that mistake a lot where people just manage up. And they forget that managing down are the people who manage, talk,
Right.
As well as your peers. So developing all of those is really important. But I'll tell you one of the biggest lessons I learned, which was at about 20 years in the company, where I was starting to feel that I was outgrowing, my time at Hallmark.
Okay.
Was just that sometimes companies can be so insular. And when you're navigating that corporate landscape, you can think about all the political things that are happening and the things that you have to manage that often exhaust people in corporate America. But I wasn't building my network externally. So I always remind people to have your relationships outside of the company in those same frameworks that I just talked about.
Yes.
So because those people open doors for you. So yes, I had mentors, and I had advocates, those are the people who talk about you when you're not in the room, and sponsors who open doors for you. But I needed to develop that outside the company. And so I was very intentional to explode my network, and make sure that I had those strong relationships outside the company as well. So I did several very intentional things to make sure that I had stronger relationships outside the company than inside the company. I didn't know when I was going to pull the trigger, but that was really important.
Wow. Well, talking about extending your relationships outside of the company and Hallmark at the time, you are definitely doing that now. So let's talk about this wonderful work you're doing, and you're extending your love, your passion, your creativity. And I think a certain media mogul by the last name of Winfrey even also embraces some of your greatness in the form of a quilt. Can you just talk about your journey, what you're doing, and your brands, if you don't mind, right now?
Sure, absolutely. So, I left Hallmark about 18 months ago, and I had a decision to make. I wanted to decide if I was going to go back to corporate America, or if I wanted to, kind of break off and do something that wasn't familiar. So I decided to do something I call a walkabout, which I recommend to a lot of people, especially if you're wanting to build those relationships outside of where you are today.
Okay.
And I talked to some of my corporate crushes. Well, there's a long list, but I made a list of people that I respected, and I wanted to talk to them about this transition time frame and what I should do, right? And just get their perspective, not on what I should do, because that's up to me, but on how they've managed large transitions and what has been the most fruitful decisions in their lives. And, what I learned was a theme around, resisting the familiar.
Okay.
And, things happen when you actually, kind of give into the process and don't try to manage everything and see where it goes. And one of those corporate crushes is Mindy Grossman, who is the CEO of WW.
Okay.
And she...
And WW, for those who don't know.
I'm sorry, Weight Watchers. Yes.
That's okay.
That's Mindy's brand. She reinvents everything that she's a part of. And so she got to Weight Watchers and now it's WW. It's all about wellness, not just about weight. So, so I was sitting down with her and I was talking to her, and she gave me great advice. And at the very end, she said, I told her that I was doing an art show, which we haven't talked about my artwork yet, but I'm an artist on the side. I've been quilting for 20 some odd years.
Yeah, we got to talk about that.
When I met you, when I met you, I was probably just getting started.
Okay.
And so she said, "What? I didn't even know you were an artist." And I said, "Yeah, I'm still trying to embrace that title." And she said, "Show me one." And I showed her one, and she said, "Kim, I have to buy this for Oprah for her birthday." So I was like, my jaw, after I picked it up off the ground, I was like, "Mindy, I'll make you a quilt for Oprah." She's like, "No, I want this one." And Adriana had never sold my quilts, right?
Oh, really?
No. They're like my kids. I was like, but when someone offers to buy it for Oprah, you kind of, you break down.
Yeah.
So I was thinking to myself, people say nice things, but she actually followed through. She bought it. She gifted it to Oprah and invited me along to meet her. And another one of my walkabout conversations was Carla Harris, who's vice chairman at Morgan Stanley, who I have a ton of respect for. And she is, not only the corporate rock star that she is, but she has this passion around her own singing. And so I sat down with her because I wanted to know, how does she manage her creative side with her business side so well? And she told me, "Kim, pay attention to how things happen, because they're indications if you're on the right path or the wrong path. What happens easily? What naturally falls into your lap? Where are the hurdles?" Those are often, deterrents that you're not on the right path. So when this happened with Oprah, I was like, oh my goodness, maybe I should embrace this art side of me. And it was just such a validating moment for me. The Oprah thing's amazing, but it was just a validating moment for me personally. And that kind of kicked off, okay, embrace the artwork then, it's good. And then I gifted both Oprah and Mindy a quilt that they could use that was also inspired by my artwork, which takes me into this new line of gift quilts that I have wanted to launch forever. And I wanted to follow my dream. And so all of that time, which is right before COVID, literally right before COVID, I decided I'm not going to go back to corporate America. I'm going to go ahead and follow my dream and embrace this creative side of me and launch my business, continue my artwork, and actually, launch my art studio. And it was such a different choice, right? Than going back and being somebody's, CMO or chief strategy officer kind of person. So.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. That is very inspirational. And you talk about the walk. You said the walk around or walkabout.
Walkabout.
I like that idea. You're right. And I think there are a lot of times there is some hesitancy there. People that we admire, that we want to get advice from, and we may feel that they won't respond. What the confidence that you had to reach out to some of those individuals? What sparked that? What helped you?
I got advice from a really good friend to do this.
Okay.
And he told me, make a list, and you'd be surprised. Don't limit yourself. You'd be surprised at who will talk to you when you don't want anything from them. So this is not a networking, hey, I need a job kind of conversation. This was I'm at a point where I need some advice and I'd love to pick your brain. And people love to talk about themselves. They love to talk about the things that they've learned. And so I knew Mindy, for example, and there were other people on my list, but I did not know Carla. Okay. And I'm in the same organization as her. I reached out to her and she responded to me in 15 minutes and told me when to show up in her office. So I was a little like, not everybody answered, but it was great. It was, so I followed the advice.
Wow. That's great. Yeah. I remember now, and you talked about when you started at Hallmark, what was great about that experience, that you were able to integrate your passions for both art and the learnings that you've established, through Vanderbilt and your work in business. And now, when did you start doing art? You mentioned your aunt, and obviously there was probably an inspiration there, but may have been more. When did you start mastering art?
No, it was dabbling. No, let's be clear. Because I was a mother and working and all that stuff. So I worked, when we were in Nashville, I worked at a Black art gallery for 6 years. Okay. So I got to see a lot of artwork and what attracted people to artwork. And it was a very emotional, connection. Mm-hmm. And then I went to spend the summer with my grandmother in DC, my dad's mom, and she taught me how to quilt. We made a quilt together. I'm a member of AKA and she is as well. And we made an AKA quilt together. And it was her idea. And I was thinking, okay, grandma, okay. But it was more about the time that we were going to spend together. And it was actually when I came back from her that summer, which was sort of fantastic for so many different reasons. When I came to Hallmark, I met a quilt artist. She was on the actual business side, but she did this as a hobby. And she taught me how to storytell quilt, or to think about images and words. Okay. And that's really when I dove right in and did a series of quilts when I was in my late 20s. And people started to ask about them and they wanted to buy them. And then I was in a couple shows here and there. And so I would just go do it when I would usually do it when I wanted to remember something. I would lay it down on a quilt because my quilts usually have words. And so,
yes, they do.
And I just did that over time, and it was right before. So about that 20-year time frame at Hallmark, I had a girlfriend who said, I need you to be in this show. I'm inviting you to be in my show and she's a nationally recognized quilt artist. And I was like, okay, but I don't really have time. And she threatened me. She was like, you were going to do 2 pieces and you're going to have them done in 6 months. And I did them. And one of those pieces was the piece that Mindy gave to Oprah. So very, very happy that happened. And then having my own show is on my bucket list, which would have happened, but was canceled due to COVID. Okay. So it's still on my bucket list and it's probably going to happen. So.
Well, no, it will. No, not probably. It will happen.
Yes, it will happen. You're right. It will happen.
No, well, let's talk about, because earlier we were just talking about COVID and the challenges, but some of the opportunities. And when I think about your product, the quilt, and first of all, they're so beautiful, by the way. And this is a great lesson also, especially for people that are in a quandary or stuck or mid-career or looking to pivot or do something that utilizes their passions, and they have all these years of experience in corporate. You have leveraged, obviously, a lot of the learnings and insights, when it comes to crafting words and inspiring people through art. You were doing it at a young age. You did it at Hallmark for so many years. And with your gifted quilts, they're like magnified greeting cards, but they're more functional and they're more inspiring and they're more inspirational. I mean,
and you keep them longer.
You don't throw them away. But like just massive, comforting, with words. You are powerful, beautiful, and brave, with a beautiful lady crying with a tear. And I mean, those. It's basically you're taking the lessons and some of those great things that make Hallmark and the greeting card business and your art, and you're utilizing them to create impact and value right now. And I think that is great. And also, you mentioned Carla Harris, which I also admire. And it's so funny when I do workshops or speaking, one of my slides, and I mentioned this in another episode, one of my slides that I use is a picture of Carla Harris and a quote from her where she literally says, and I quote, she mentions, all major decisions about your career will be made when you're not in the room. That's a famous quote from Carla Harris. And I use that quote to help demystify what brand is and why understanding your personal brand and relationship is so important, especially in the professional environment, because a lot of times those stakeholders, what they think about you when you're not around can determine the trajectory of your career, at least at that point in time. And so Carla is just phenomenal.
She's phenomenal. She is.
So your purpose and mission, which I want to unpack some more. I mean, you have a way about you of utilizing art and inspiration to motivate people to do something, especially women. And I'm sure that there are people outside of women and other demographics, but your sweet spot. And you also crafted a book and a brand. And I want you to talk about that, which is really steeped in intention. If you could talk about the intentional pause project.
Well, a couple things I just want to connect dots on.
Yes.
Before I jump into that is that, when I was at Hallmark, what attracted me there was the art side of it. But I think what really I left with was this, and what part of what kept me there was helping people with the emotional journeys of life. And, that is what I think quilts do. I think they support people during really hard times. I think they can be inspirational tools for growth. And, I still own my great grandmother's quilt. I have 100-year-old quilt right here next to me, actually. And it's something that lasts beyond a lifetime, and I was like, gosh, what if we had something that we could be a daily warming reminder for you. And that's why I started laying affirmations on these quilts, because you see them every day. They should be used. My art quilts go on the wall, but the gift quilts can be washed and used. They're there to be used. They're beautiful like artwork, but they are to be used, and they should be tools for comfort. And so one of the reasons why I gave them to Lovey and Kim is when one of my dreams, and we're about to talk about dreaming, one of my dreams it was one, launching this gift line.
Okay.
But two, to gift it to women that I admire. And so I gifted my first 50 quilts to women that I admire who had touched me, and maybe they didn't even know that they did. Like, I don't know Lovey necessarily, but she's gifted, and she's gifting so many women today, this idea of fearlessness. Right. So that's one of the reasons. So there were so many people. Oprah got a quilt. Sarita Jakes got a quilt. Ariana Huffington got a quilt. Wow. Carla got a quilt, so there were a list of women, Stacey Abrams. So that was just really, really important to me. So bringing it back around to intention, when this 20-year mark was really important for me. I was noticing with the women that I was mentoring that there was this sense of achievement. They would come to me on how they could get promoted, or they wanted to get a new job or go to a different company, or, and I mentored women outside of Hallmark all over the country. And there was just this sense of achievement, but they were extremely overwhelmed. Okay. Right. And here they were just about to smash another goal. And while they were achieving, they were somewhat underwhelmed. So it's like this overwhelmed, but underwhelmed, but on this treadmill to go get this other goal. And I just thought it was fascinating because I was going through the same thing. And so I decided to do a research study. Okay. And so I took about 500 women, and, this is all my geeky marketing background. Right. Like, what is the need? What is going on here? Yes. And I found out 91% of women are just unapologetically ambitious, but extremely overwhelmed. Overwhelmed at work, but more overwhelmed in their personal life, 81%. But this huge underwhelmedness because only 36% said they were following their dreams. Wow. And I thought that was fascinating. I was like, so you're smashing it. You're ambitious, you're going after it, but you're not really doing what you want to do, quote unquote, your dreams, right? But they were afraid. So I did some qualitative. I went and talked to women. And what I found is they were afraid of getting off this achievement treadmill because, and I call it autopilot, because they were afraid they were going to fail, right? So failure and fear were just these big questions that were out there, you know, but they weren't necessarily happy. And so I was like, you know, I want to find a solution for this. And, you know, I mentioned that I think that my purpose, leaving corporate America, has brought me to my purpose, which I think is helping people through the emotional journeys of life. And I do that through my artwork that is emotive. I do that through the gift quilts. And I do this through what I developed, which was a workbook. It's not a book, it's a workbook, because the research culminated in women needing three things: permission to pause. This idea of stopping. And I don't mean like taking a sabbatical and quitting your job. I just mean taking enough time, not for a spa day, but to actually be still, to actually listen to what you really, really want and what is going on. So I call that your deepest desires. And it takes time to go down there. And it's not always fun to go down there, you know, because then you realize that you're not going after them, right? And so then 2 was, you know, tools to help them navigate. What do I really want to do? And 3 strategies to fight fear. So that's why I created the Intentional Pause Dream Workbook. It should give you the permission. I'm like, permission granted. In fact, it is required. Wow. And the workbook takes you through my framework, which, you know, I have this background in strategy. So literally the last 15 years. And so I just took personal strategy. This is like personal strategy. And so it goes pause to audit, pause to dream, pause to activate, pause to fortify, and pause to actify. It takes them through a series of intentional pauses. I say it takes a couple hours for each one. But, you know, a lot of folks I was talking to were like, I don't even know where to start. Like, even if I had a dream I wanted to go after, I don't know how to stop what I'm doing. So enough to even figure it out. So that's what this is about. And one of the things I think is most differentiating about it is helping people with the emotional plan. So I studied why people give up, and they give up for one of 5 reasons: your fears, obstacles, relationships, emotions, or your self-talk. Wow. And I call it your forest. So don't get lost in your forest. See the forest through the trees. So this idea of developing an emotional plan once you have your dream is really important, because I will tell you, and then I'm going to stop talking, but I'm going to tell you, this journey of mine, I have to use all the tools in my workbook. I can imagine, yes. Because it is so different to not be in my normal corporate environment, and you know, and having to have that self-starting entrepreneurial approach, you know, and motivating yourself. And so it is important to have an emotional plan, because I knew it was going to be different. So that's what the intentional pause is. And it's really resonating with people. Yes. They appreciate the tools. That's one thing. They really appreciate having a process and knowing that there is a next step, and they all build upon each other.
Well, Kim, I think it's an excellent project. It's an excellent approach. And I love that. Let me go back through that approach again, which I love. Number 1, you said pause to audit. Number 2, pause to dream. Then pause to activate, pause to fortify, and then pause to actify. I like that, actify.
Yes, that's taking your activate and your fortify, putting it together.
Well, it was funny too, you know, being a fellow grad in MBA, like I get my geeky side. You know, I love frameworks as well. I have my framework. You could tell, you know.
Yes, I saw your framework. It's excellent, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yours is too. I love forests. You know, that's part of. I'm joking, but you know, when you spend 20 some years in corporate, even like myself, and you along the way, you start to just navigate toward approaches. And, you know, I love frameworks because they simplify things. And as a marketer, you want things to be memorable. And, I love forests, fears, obstacles, relationships, emotions, and self-talk. I like that. It's like
You got to demystify.
You had to demystify.
And dedicate. That's right.
But your purpose is a very inspiring purpose. I love helping people through the emotional journeys of life. And you mentioned too, you use your own frameworks for yourself. You have to, just like I do as well. Can you just talk about when you initially put this out in the world to create impact, to create value, to help women intentionally pause? What was that initial response like? I'm just curious to hear the type of impact and the type of reception with what you're doing, even with your quilts, but also even with going deeper with the project.
Well, when I first unveiled it, I unveiled it to a group of, there were a couple of groups, but they were of board-ready women. And so think about CEOs and C-suite executives.
Right.
And I was really developing this for a younger demographic.
Okay.
Because I wish I had followed my dreams sooner,
Yes.
right? But what I found was that, again, ambitious women come in all ages, and I'm going to talk about my men here in a second, but come in all ages, and you're never too old to dream. And it resonated so much with these women who had been at the top of their careers or at the top of their careers. And they were like, this has been so impactful for me because it has opened the idea that I should dream. And these things that I've really wanted to do all my life, this is the time. And I can do this. And it may be different than what I was doing, but that's okay. So this idea of permission to pause, but permission to dream and permission to think about their emotions. As busy people, we don't always tap into our emotions. And I wanted to develop the emotional plan because I figured out that I had emotional laryngitis.
Wow.
on my walkabout, I talked to a woman who talked to me about how I was feeling.
Okay.
And she asked me to document my feelings 3 times a day. And I can't tell you how hard that was for me. And how can you really determine what you need if you don't know how you feel?
Right.
And that was a big insight for me. And so the emotional side, just like any business transformation, we always talk about how culture eats strategy for lunch.
Right.
If you don't have the right culture in an organization, you're never going to transform. Well, if you don't have the right culture or emotional state in yourself, you're never going to transform. And so this idea of living your full potential is so passionate. I'm so passionate about that. Not just for me, but helping other people with it. It has really resonated. I've talked to people who are on their cancer journey, and this idea of dreaming has just opened the door for them. Younger folks. And let me talk about my men. So the men in my life are like, whoa, why is this just for women? and I really wish, and maybe with my next approach at this, I'll talk about to me, it is more of a feminine approach to reinvention because I'm using and inspired by what was important to women. But I've had men buy this book and said that, what, the whole world is wired around men, and I need a feminine approach. I want to try something different. And so I loved that. I was like, man, I wish I had thought of that. But it's a feminine approach to reinvention. And I've had a lot of people say, men have emotions too. I'm like, absolutely, absolutely. I'm not trying to say that. But it's been a great response. It's been a great response. And honestly, when I was writing it, I've never desired to write a book.
Okay.
That was when I doubled down on my own dream, because I'm like, how can I lecture people about, following their dreams and I'm not following mine?
Yeah, no. Exactly.
So, and I, it's like, I can't do that. So I launched my gift quilts. I'm, working through it. And I also wanted to get on a corporate board because I really wanted a strong tie back to corporate America, because I do enjoy that world.
Yep.
And so I just got on my first board.
Congratulations. Congrats.
Thank you. It's been good stuff. It's been good stuff. So
wow. That's inspiring. That's actually one of my goals as well. Just like you, I spent many years in corporate, and there's a strong tie, and definitely at the stage of my life, where I want to give back and create impact. And it's interesting. You talk about the demographic, and you initially and intentionally wanted to target more of the younger demographic, but as you mentioned, which I do personally, I champion all the time about how you're never too old and it's never too late to create impact. This is applicable to anyone in every stage of their career, especially when you're mid-career and you're stuck and you have all these years of experience. You've worked 20-something years in corporate, and you're looking to elevate your presence. And so I definitely see how this, the book and the project and even the quilts are so beneficial to everyone. And it's interesting. I was going to say this too, and I was remiss not to mention her earlier. So Hallmark just pumps out some of the best leaders. Right? My friend Tara J. Frank.
Tara, yes, I knew who you were going to bring up. Yes,
Tara, who I interviewed also. She spent multiple years like yourself.
That's right.
At 20-something years, she's now doing her thing. What is it about? Kansas.
So Tara and I started the same. We were both interns together.
Wow.
And she left a couple years before I did.
Okay.
But she and I were actually the only two African-American senior women there.
Whoa.
And then she left me to do greater things. But no, so yeah, Tara and I she is a fantastic leader, and talk about being on brand and being consistent, and her brand interactions, they're all powerful. And she's very inspiring, and it's great to have her as a friend.
Yes.
And I just want to give a shout out to your framework and communicating and promoting your value to others. You have to know what it is first before you can amplify it.
Yes.
And I think that was really actually a challenge for me. I mean, I grew up in brand. I was literally leading brand. And then I had to step back and say, well, what am I about? And how would I how do I put, quilting and artwork, and how do I put that with corporate, being a corporate nerd? Like, how do I put all that together? But it was such a valuable exercise, and so I'm so happy you're helping people. And if I learned anything at Hallmark, it was the importance of reinvention. And I would say that I think it's really important to think about what you want to be in the future instead of just thinking about protecting what you've been.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So I think there is a balance, but it's really important to disrupt yourself. And that's what I felt at 20 years. I needed a disruption. And I prayed for that. I prayed for it very specifically, and I got it.
Wow.
So,
well, you definitely got it. And first of all, thank you so much for the kind words. It means a lot, especially coming from you. Anything I'm sure you know this, that you create, you definitely would love some validation, and it's proven valuable, and basically defining the blueprint of who you are, your DNA. It's a framework called the Porter's 5 Ps of brand DNA, which is understanding your, number one, your purpose, number 2, your brand positioning, number 3, your brand promise, and then 4, your brand personality, and then your brand presence, where you get into your visual identity and how you look and appear. So those 5 Ps, again, see, I'm just geeking out on I'm a marketer.
Yes.
So, you have Porter's 5 Forces. I have Adrian Porter's 5 Ps.
That's awesome.
But thank you so much. And, I can talk to you and geek out on business, on marketing, on everything. What you're doing with the Intentional Pause Project and the quilts. But there's one question that we haven't gotten to that I always ask all of my guests on the Powerful Brand Podcast. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So Kim, if there was a song that would play every time you enter a room or when you walk down the street that perfectly fits you, your story, and the brand of Kim Alexis Newton, what song would that be? What would be your own personal theme song?
I love this question. So I'm going to have to say 2 songs, though. I can't just answer one.
That's quite all right.
Well, what I would say is it should be Nonstop by Drake. I love that song. But they probably couldn't play it because of the explicit nature. So, but I would actually pick our Queen Bee, Beyonce. I would pick Bigger, because I love the fact that, I think that everyone needs reminding that you are so much bigger. The purpose is so much bigger, and that you can always reinvent yourself. And there is something divine within each of us. And I remember hearing that song for the first time, and I was like, she did it again. She did it again. But I love that song. Yeah, that would definitely be my personal theme song.
Wow, Beyonce gets much love. That is a great.
Yes.
You talk about a powerful brand. And a great song choice. That's a very nice, popular song, Bigger. And we can't forget about your choice, Nonstop by Drake.
Nonstop, yeah, no doubt. It's not a stopwatch.
It's not a stopwatch. I like that. Well, speaking of nonstop, and you definitely have created nonstop value and impact ever since you, I was going to say, entered the halls, at Owen, but even before then at Fisk, since you were young, creating art. And along your journey in different ways, and that purpose that has really manifested now, it's always been there, I believe, helping people through the emotional journeys of life in different vocations in different ways. But it's really amplified since your time you left Hallmark, through your quilts, through the relationships you're developing, through the show that you're going to launch, through the book. And I'm really inspired by your journey. And my purpose is to help people create value and create meaningful impact on the world. And people like you really help build it to what it needs to be, because sharing your story, Kim, listening to the lessons that you have learned and applied, understanding the brands that you are creating with your quilt, with the words, with the inspiration through the art and the book, is a true testament. And so I just want to applaud you, especially coming from someone from Tennessee, from Vandy,
Yes.
majored in accounting undergrad, then do marketing.
Right. We got all this stuff.
We got all this stuff.
Yes.
Coming up with frameworks. And so again, it's truly an honor. And I do believe, we talk about legacy brands, and I mentioned Hallmark, but I do believe the brand of Kim Alexis Newton and the Intentional Pause and Kim Quilts will be legacy brands for years to come. Kim, if you can,
thank you, Adrian.
If you can my pleasure. If you can let everyone know how they can continue to keep in touch with you and your greatness and the products and the art and the inspiration, if you could let everyone know, that would be great.
Absolutely. So I'm kimalexisnewton.com, and you can see the quilts and learn more about the Intentional Pause Project right there. And I am at Kim Alexis Newton on Instagram, on Twitter, also on LinkedIn. So I've been pretty consistent across all the socials. Kim Alexis Newton. You can find me. So
that is the true testament of a marketer.
Well, I had to make sure everything was open.
I know.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, hey, I tell people all the time, I understand some things aren't open. And you have to do like little hyphens and underscores.
Yes.
But it's
we
all
can
good.
Make it happen.
But we can make it happen. Kim, this has been great. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me and the community.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
Take care. Okay. The awesome and phenomenal and wonderful Kim Alexis Newton. Wow. Quilting, I tell you, that is such a powerful pivot story, right? Over 20 years, Hallmark Cards executive, but now she is making her mark on the world by quilting, by advising, leadership, helping women, just doing it all. So inspiring. Make sure, if you're not already, follow Kim, follow what she's doing, buy her quilt, support her, follow her journey. I tell you, you will be empowered. You will be empowered, especially if someone that has truly is living mid-career mastery. All right, that was it. Another conversation and another episode on Gen X Amplified. And don't forget, if you have enjoyed this chat with Kim or any of the episodes, please make sure you share, leave a comment, leave a rating and review, share on LinkedIn, and also go to adrianporter.com to catch up on all the other episodes, and also what I offer as a speaker, workshops, and just any value that I can add to you. But again, make sure you follow Kim and follow her journey. So that's it. Thank you for listening to the podcast. This episode dedicated to you, the powerful and exceptional generation between those brilliant boomers and magnificent millennials. Take care.